So let me give you a little background before I dive into this. A couple of years ago, I got into urban exploration. A few buddies and I would explore the Twin Cities area for anything and everything abandoned. The sketchier the better. Gray Cloud Island, old breweries, rundown factories, drain tunnels beneath cities, and old farmhouses. I loved seeing the way time reaches its fingers around creation after mankind had left. It was a fun weekend hobby, despite a run-in or two with squatters. I began running a blog with photographs and details about my adventures. It got a pretty sizable following. It wasn't long before I got an email from what appeared to be a small monthly magazine that wanted to do a section on urban exploration. They gave me a phone number and asked me to give them a call. As they'd love to have my work, they offered to negotiate a rate for my exploration. The magazine was called Gatherings, and it looked legitimate, though I had never heard of it. The magazine seemed to revolve around travel, I think, but there didn't seem to be any overall theme to it. Loving the idea of getting paid to do my hobby, I gave them a call. Hello? There was nothing for a few seconds before a lady responded, "Gatherings magazine, may I help you?" I told her why I was called, and she responded, "Oh, perfect, we'd love to have you run an Urbex section in our page. All you'd have to do is find 1 or 2 spots a month. With that, we'd want lots of photos of the spot itself and the surrounding area, details on the place, and either an address or a location of the spot. On top of that, feel free to write about your experience at the spot." I asked them if they wanted a specific type of building or farmhouses, etc. The lady said, "Anything. It can be an old factory or a small house in the suburbs, as long as it's been abandoned for a while." All right, it seemed pretty cool, I thought. I didn't know how I felt about giving so many details about the spots I've found, since that's a prime way to get a spot noticed and closed off. What's your offer for a rate?" I asked. She promptly replied, $5,000 each location. There's no way she was that serious. "What?" I replied. "Send us the location and you'll receive payment in the mail for each location." All right, I thought. I'm in. "Wonderful. Whenever you're ready, just send in our first spot and you'll be getting paid." She hung up immediately afterwards. Well, find a spot, get the details, photos, and then send it in? This was going to be a blast. The next weekend, I went to a small farmhouse I had found before, but never blogged about. It was about a mile down a dirt road. I'm not going to give any details here, but it was somewhere several miles north of White Bear Lake. I got the photos, exact location, and some descriptions. I sent it in via email and received no reply. I was kind of disappointed, figuring I had probably fell for some sort of scam. However, a few days later, I went to get my mail and found an envelope with the Gatherings logo on it. I opened it up and there it was, $5,000 in cash. A small note inside read, "Thank you for your first submission. We were grateful to receive it. This gift is the first of many in our partnership. With regards, Gatherings Magazine." I immediately began planning my next trip. I was going to hit some tunnels under Minneapolis that I blogged about before. However, I was going to do it more extensively this time. I did the same thing and sent it in. A few days later, in the mail, I received an envelope with my cash. There was another note, though, which read, "Thank you for your submission. However, we would like to clarify that you are under no circumstances to submit to us any locations which you have previously made public. We apologize for not clarifying this. With regards, Gatherings Magazine." Well, that was odd. I guess they wanted originality. The note had a weird, hostile vibe to it, though, and it lacked the watermark that the other note had. But I still got my $5,000, and I'm getting more, so I had to travel farther out to get to new spots. But every weekend I was out after it. The farther out of my way I had to go, the more I got paid. I also noticed the more remote the location, the more I was paid. But the money was generally between $5,000 to $7,000 per location. I emailed them letting them know I was going to slow down for a few months, and they had no issues with it. About a month later, a buddy of mine wanted to get into my little hobby. No one at this point knew I was making money to do this, so I decided to take him to that little farmhouse from my first submission. We went out on Saturday morning together. We parked along down the road and walked to the farmhouse. It looked small from the outside and its paint was worn to brown. It's hard to notice if you're not looking for it, Inside, it's empty except for a cellar door which leads to a quite sizable basement. In the basement, there are a few closed closets and some tables. I'm pretty sure they're all closets. All but one of the doors was locked shut with old rusted locks. The one unlocked door was an empty closet. We approached the barn, and the first thing my buddy noticed was the smell. He mentioned it, and I noticed it too. It smelled like a mixture of burnt hair and skunk, or maybe weed. At the entrance was, well, a skunk. However, it looked like it had been disemboweled by some animal. It was old too. It reeked. I poked it aside with a stick and we entered the barn. The smell grew stronger. We both looked at each other and he asked me if it had smelled like this the last time. He walked around a bit, getting up on the storage ledge and finding some old action figures around it. They were pretty retro and kind of cool. However, I didn't remember them from before. We decided to enter the cellar. We opened the door and entered the unlit area. I worked my flashlight out of my backpack and flipped the switch, lighting the cellar. Blood was smeared across every wall. Flies buzzed to and fro across the room in a disturbing, continuous hum. Drawings were on the floor in odd shapes and numerals. Melted candle wax stained the ground. In my disorientation, I ran over to one of the previously locked doors and, panicking, turned the doorknob, which was difficult to turn, but it clicked, and I felt the door push me backwards. I fell down, and as I watched, what had to be 4 or 5 bodies plunge out from what was confirmed to be another closet. I just stared for what felt like a minute. I remember they were all adult bodies, save for one, clearly a child. There was one who fell forward almost on me. His chest was open up, cut down just above his pelvis. It almost looked surgical in contrast to the blood on the walls. I gathered myself and noticed my buddy was already out of the room. I got out of there and saw him outside. I just sort of looked at him and said, "What was that?" We didn't really talk for the rest of the day. I don't know if he thought I did that to him on purpose, but he was visibly shaken, and I was too. I was hesitant to call the police. I mean, what are they going to think about me? The only guy to have found it? But before I could, there was a note in my mail. "We respectfully ask that under no circumstances do you return to any of the locations you have submitted to us. We apologize for the inconvenience." I think I'm done submitting, and I'm going back to the second location I submitted. I don't think the spots I'm providing are just for a cool magazine section.